Well, welcome everybody to Rxperience. We have a very special podcast today. This is the ASCP podcast. I'm your host, Chad Wurz, Chief Executive, and alongside me is my co-host, Tom Hansel, Hansel Health. And it's America 250. It's the week of July 4th, 2026. It's extremely festive around the DC area this week and really the whole year. And we're excited, very excited to have our favorite member of Congress on the podcast, Buddy Carter. Buddy, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and I couldn't agree with you more. What a great week it is. 250 years of the greatest experiment ever in government, and we just have so much to be thankful for and so much to celebrate.
Totally agree, and I hope people do that. I hope people put aside some of their differences this week and really enjoy the fact that it's been 250 years. This isn't a fly-by-night country. This is a working democratic republic, and it goes through its trials, but it always comes out moving forward. So very exciting times here.
Especially with everything that's going on, it's really refreshing to see when we've got the World Cup going on here, all the visitors who are here and their reaction to our country, and they're just flabbergasted that we have all the freedoms we have and that we live in such a great country. So looking at it from their lens it gives us an idea of just how fortunate we are. Sometimes we take things for granted, and we shouldn't, because we are truly blessed to live in the greatest country in the world.
Absolutely.
Well, Buddy, we always start this podcast with kind of a origin story. I think we've talked about your origin story before as a pharmacist, but you're one of two members of Congress that is a pharmacist. You have been a leader for our industry, and so important. And we'll get into things like PBM reform, which passed earlier this year, the Main Street Pharmacy Act, which we have a good feeling is going to pass by the end of this year, which would be the first step of provider status, which obviously is something I was talking about in pharmacy school at the turn of the last century. So it's great to think that might come to fruition. But give us your pharmacy origin story. How'd you get here as a pharmacist?
Well, I tell you, I tell people the story all the time. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a football star. Unfortunately, not only was I short, I was also slow. So it just did not work out. And I made a deal with my dad. I said, Daddy, if Oklahoma or Nebraska hasn't sent a scout out to see me play football by the end of my junior year, I'll get serious about a career. And I don't know what happened, but they didn't send anybody out. So anyway, I decided to get serious about a career, and I got a job as a delivery driver in a drugstore. And it was an omen from God, because it was exactly what I wanted to do. It was healthcare, and I love healthcare, and it was also dealing with the public. It was a retail business, and obviously very extroverted, and I love dealing with the public. So I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I worked my senior year in high school at a drugstore, and then I went off to school and went straight to pharmacy school and was able to graduate and pretty quick, and was back home and actually practicing pharmacy by the time I was 22, and started and worked for someone for 8 years, and then decided to open my own business. And November 21st, 1988, I opened Carter's Pharmacy, a retail pharmacy. And I tell people all the time, and I don't mean to be long-winded here, but I had a friend, a gentleman who owned a nursing home in the town I grew up in. And he called me and he said, I want you to service my nursing home. And I said, man, I ain't got time to service your nursing home. I got to get my business going, and I just don't have time. He said, come on. So I said, okay, I'll do it. But I said, after I get my business going, you're just going to have to find someone else, because I just got to get this going. So then I had my roommate from college call me up, and he said, hey, I've got somebody who's got a nursing home down there. They want you to service it. I said, y'all need to leave me alone. I got to get my business going. So the next thing I know, I started out with 2 nursing homes. Before I knew it, I had 4, and then I had 6. And then my roommate from college called me back up and he said, you need to separate your businesses. And back then you could get better pricing if you had a separate inventory. So I did that. I had an institutional pharmacy and I had the retail pharmacies, and I did well with the retail pharmacies. I grew it to 3 pharmacies, 3 retail pharmacies, but I did exceptionally well with the institutional. I finally ended up selling it to a company out of Cincinnati, Ohio, Omnicare. And when I sold it, I was very proud of the fact that it was the 2nd largest independent provider of nursing homes in the state of Georgia. So we did exceptionally well. I tell people all the time, having 20 nursing homes was like having 20 girlfriends. They all wanted your attention. But it was a lot of work, but it was worth it. And I did it very well with the retail pharmacies, but I did exceptionally well with the institutional. So,
and awesome. you were a member of ASCP.
Yes, absolutely, and a very involved member. And in fact, that was the first trip I'd ever taken out of the country. I went to Montreal, Canada, to a convention up there with the ASCP, and I remember that was a special trip. My roommate from college went with me, so that made it very special for both of us. But when I had my pharmacies, and I was so blessed and have been so blessed in my life, I knew I wanted to give back to the community. It had given so much to me. So I volunteered and I served on the planning and zoning committee of our city, the city of Pooler. Then I ran for city council. Then I ran for mayor. Then I ran for state rep. Then I ran for state senate. Then I ran for Congress. And, I tell people all the time that I couldn't keep a job. I kept running. But and then, of course, here recently I ran for the Senate. Unfortunately, that didn't turn out the way we had hoped it would. But, I'm telling people right now, and I'll tell y'all that I still got a lot of gas left in my tank. So don't write my political obituary just yet. I'm not going to rule out anything, including running again. So we'll see what the future holds.
That's awesome. I'm assuming that roommate in college you're talking about is Bob Warnock.
It is indeed. Bob and Holly are lifelong friends of ours.
Yeah.
I say lifelong. We met in college. Holly was in our wedding. My wife Amy was in their wedding, and both of them are physical therapists. And Bob, of course, and I are pharmacists. And Bob's had a big influence in my life.
Yeah, well, Bob was a mentor of mine. I worked with him for a few years as well, and he used to tell me that everything you know about pharmacy, he taught you.
He did.
And so I was going to give you the opportunity here today to defend yourself and to tell me that that's not true. But that's the way. I think that's the way that long-term care in general is across the nation. It's helping each other's, and you guys were in some ways could be seen as competitors, both being in Georgia servicing long-term care, but here you are supporting and helping each other.
That's exactly right, and it is kind of a fraternity, if you will, and we all, as you say, work together, and it's interesting because it's kind of a niche market, but at the same time, it's such an important market and such an important, and it really has helped me in Congress too to be able to recognize the need that people have and the healthcare needs that we have in long-term care, especially.
So, where do you think growing up in Georgia, having to work as a staff pharmacist and then having your own business and kind of running that? I mean, you come across as an outgoing, warm, and very approachable person in general, but you also know when to stand firm. You also know when to fight for what you believe in. So does that come from more of your upbringing in Georgia? Did you have to learn that as a pharmacist when you had to work with patients, or where did that come from?
It's appropriate on our 250th anniversary of the greatest country ever in the world that, I've lived the American dream. My grandfather was a sharecropper. He didn't own the land. He worked the land. And I can remember my dad taking me down a dirt road where he grew up in rural Georgia and telling me we used to live here, we used to live here, we used to live. They just lived wherever the land was they were working. And then my dad left the country and went to Savannah and got a job working in a paper mill, working shift work, and he worked shift work. And I was the first one in my extended family to go to college and to graduate. I tell people all the time, I left home the day I turned 18. It wasn't, I'm 18, I'm out of here. It just so happened to be the day I turned 18. I swore up and down I'd never go back. And and the first thing I did when I got out of college was go straight back home. I don't know what happened, but in that period of time, my dad went from being the dumbest man I'd ever met to the smartest man I'd ever met. So it really was. It really has been. I've lived the American dream, and 250 years, and we want to keep that going. That's why we work so hard up here, and I work so hard in Congress, is to give the next generation the opportunity to live the American dream as well.
So, buddy, let's pivot to some of your biggest wins in your time in Congress. I think the maybe the biggest to date is the PBM reform that we passed this past. I don't know if it was end of January or early February, but talk about that. We talk about it in the sense that, yay, we passed it, but now the work really begins to hold these PBMs accountable, write the rules, make sure we have the right pieces in place to get some movement in these in how these PBMs work with pharmacies in particular. Talk about that, because I think some people, even the PBMs are out there like, oh, we're transparent now, like we flipped a switch and passed a bill and we're super transparent. I'm like, no, you're not. Number one, and number two, we're building the rules right now. But talk about that and where you think it's going.
Well, first of all, you make a great point. We've had some success, particularly here at the first of the year when we passed the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2026. We got the most significant PBM reform we've ever had, but we got to make sure we follow through on it. We got to make sure the PBMs follow through on it. So thank you for making that point, because that's an excellent point. But we did get a lot done. I do want, during my 12 years in Congress, obviously I've focused on healthcare, particularly on pharmacy issues and trying to bring down the price of prescription drugs. I can remember I started practicing pharmacy in 1980, and I was 10 years old, by the way. But anyway, I started practicing pharmacy in 1980, and I can remember when PBMs were nothing more than processors. I mean, all they did was process claims, and then they evolved, as we know, over the years, where the insurance companies have bought them up, or they've actually bought an insurance company. I think Express Scripts bought Cigna. I mean, it was, but you got 3 PBMs that control 80% of the market, and we have made some good movement and we've had some good wins and some good successes, but we got a long ways to go. The Consolidated Appropriations Act that you referred to earlier this year, really we accomplished 3 things. One of them is that we de-linked the compensation from a percentage of the drug to just a flat fee. And that was important. That was important to make sure that we could do that. And that should save a lot of money right there, because some of these markups these PBMs are making are just outrageous. In fact, I saw a stat the other day that the Berkeley Research Group said that only 37% of the price that you pay for a prescription drug actually goes to the pharmaceutical manufacturer. The rest of it goes to the PBM. Yeah. And that's just ridiculous. And so this will help tremendously in that respect. Also, it gives the opportunity for CMS to review contracts between pharmacies and PBMs to make sure they're reasonable and relevant. And to your earlier point about we got to hold their feet to the fire and make sure they follow this, CMS already has said, well, we're not sure we can do that, and we're not sure we have the authority or the ability to do that. Well, this is codified, and we've passed this into law. We're going to make sure that they do it and they follow through on it. And yeah, it's somewhat subjective in the sense that you say it's reasonable and relevant, but we've got to make sure that that CMS is following through on that, because some of these contracts that are being offered to pharmacies are just ridiculous. I mean, you can't afford to lose money like this. And the third thing and the final thing that it did was the transparency part of it, and that is to make sure that the PBMs are showing the discounts that they're getting, so that the plan sponsors and so that the employees can see those discounts. And if they can see those discounts, then they'll demand that they be shared with the plan sponsor or with the covered employees. So all that is extremely important. I was very proud of that. I would be remiss if I did not mention that one of the earliest pieces of legislation dealing with PBMs that I passed was doing away with the gag clause. If you'll remember,
That's right.
there was a time when you sign a contract with the PBM, and they would make that they would have a clause in that contract that was referred to as the gag clause to say that you as the pharmacist could not tell the patient that if they paid cash, it would be cheaper. You couldn't tell them that. If you did, you ran the risk of being kicked out of the network. And of course, you can't afford to be not in the network. So we passed the law, and President Trump signed it during his first administration, that says that the pharmacist can tell the patient that, hey, if you pay cash for this, it's going to be $4, but if you pay your copay, it's going to be $35. So,
that's interesting.
Very, very proud of that.
It's interesting you bring that up, because one of the things that we're working through right now is, even with CMS, and we're part of a coalition led by NCPA with a number of other pharmacy associations, which is exciting because we're all pushing and working together. But one of the things we're struggling with is a lot of those PBM contracts, particularly with our pharmacies, say you can't share that information with anyone, and arguably including the federal government. So we're working through with CMS a way to make sure the pharmacies feel comfortable sharing the contracts, because their contracts actually say they can't share them. So it's the same sort of ridiculous clauses that these PBMs put in place for pharmacies that make it even more challenging to get past that and get to real transparency. They want nothing to do with transparency. So we've got to keep pushing and working to make sure that pharmacies can share those contracts so CMS can see, oh yeah, these are completely unfair. These practices are not fair, and we've got to put the appropriate rules in place for PBM reform so that it does what we want it to do.
Yeah.
And that is a great point. And if I could just add this, let's don't lose sight of the fact that these PBMs are very powerful.
Sure.
They got a ton of money, and they've got a ton of influence up here in Washington, D.C., as you would expect, because they are essentially the insurance company. I mean, we all understand the vertical integration that exists, where the insurance company owns the PBM, that owns the group purchasing organization, that owns the pharmacy, that owns the doctor. The leading employer of physicians in America is United Healthcare. 9% of all physicians work for United Healthcare, which there's nothing wrong with working for United Healthcare, but 9% of all physicians in America work for an insurance company. I mean, that should tell you something right there, that vertical integration that exists. And that's one thing that we have to keep in mind, is that they are powerful and they do have a lot of money. And I've experienced it just recently when in my Senate race, they spent a lot of money against me, and they don't want me over there. And right. That's what we have to fight against.
Absolutely.
Buddy, if CMS is lacking resources, I can come up with a bunch of volunteers to audit those PBM contracts that I know people would gladly do. But you had the experience as a healthcare worker, but I'd say most people in Congress, they learn healthcare through briefings and policy papers and in hearings, and you got to experience it with patients and families. So how do you go about kind of mentoring even your own not just constituents, but you're mentoring your own congressmen and women and senators up there because you do have that experience?
Well, and that's invaluable, as you say, because remember, I had a retail pharmacy, and I practiced, and I was the one who had to go to the counter and tell the senior citizen how much their medication was. I was the one who had to watch them make a decision between buying their medicine and buying their groceries. Right. I was the one who had to go to the counter and tell the mother how much the antibiotic was for their child. And I was the one who watched the mother in tears as she tried to figure out how she was going to pay for it. So those are real life experiences that I'm able to share with my colleagues up here. But I do have to say that, it's the grassroots efforts. And when I say grassroots effort, I mean of all the pharmacists out there, because I have members of Congress come up to me all the time. And, there are 435 members up here. They come up to me and they say, I didn't know you were a pharmacist. I've got a pharmacist that was in my office last week that said, you got a letter that I need to sign on to. So I'm going to have my staff call your staff and we're going to get on that letter. That's the grassroots efforts of pharmacists truly advocating for our patients. And it is about our patients, as you say, because they are the ones who we are here to serve. And to the point that you made earlier, Chad, about making sure that pharmacists are paid, and in the ECAPs and the and making sure that the Main Street Pharmacy Act, that Adrian Smith from Nebraska is carrying that in the Ways and Means Committee. And I was with Adrian, I traveled with him a couple of weeks ago. He's very optimistic that we're going to be able to get that passed. And he's working diligently on that. We appreciate his efforts there. And Ways and Means, of course, is a tax committee. And it'll come through Energy and Commerce also, but it originates in Ways and Means.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's the other thing that the other shoe to drop this year that I think is so important for pharmacy. It does add us to the Social Security Act as providers. It's limited to test treat for infectious disease, but that's a great start. Something that certainly we performed during the pandemic. Something certainly that we do every day as pharmacists in different states around the country. And it's that first step toward really using the pharmacist to the highest of their license, and being a hub of healthcare, being a center of healthcare. So we're excited about that bill.
Well, and as we should be, because, pharmacists are the most accessible healthcare professionals in America. 90% of all Americans live within 5 miles of a pharmacy. And that makes us the most accessible healthcare professionals out there. And to your point about working to the highest level of our license, we've got to be able to do that. The only way we're ever going to bring healthcare costs down here in America is to have all of our different disciplines of medicine working to the highest level of their license.
100%.
We all agree the doctor is the quarterback, the doctor's the captain, but at the same time, the old days of the doctor makes every decision, those are past.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, for sure. When you think about long-term care pharmacies in general, you obviously are very familiar with that, running one for such a long time. But when I think about the opportunity for us to become invisible, and when you look at policymakers, I would say most of them probably don't know what long-term care pharmacy is. I don't know if that's fair, if you'd agree with that. But how do we, I guess, become more obvious to policymakers, to get them to understand that long-term care pharmacies are such a critical part of the infrastructure of our senior population, our most vulnerable population that's rapidly growing through the baby boomer population. And with IRA, some unintended consequences of the IRA is really putting a hurting on the bottom line for long-term care pharmacies. And what we believe that we could potentially see is long-term care pharmacies, especially the smaller ones, closing just because of the passing of IRA. How do we get that information and get policymakers to understand that we're not just dispensing drugs, that we're the center part of senior care communities?
Yeah, and that's extremely important because, when I was still practicing, I spent hours on end as a consultant pharmacist in the nursing homes, just going through patients' charts, making recommendations for drug therapy. I think that one of the things that is most effective up here is if we can have advocates and family members and people who have family members in the nursing home setting. If they can tell that story, that is extremely important, and that gets the attention of members of Congress. Or invite them to the practice setting, invite them to a nursing home and show them, hey, this is what we do. One of the primary reasons people are admitted to the nursing home is medication administration. That is one of the primary reasons, to make sure that they get their medication at the right time. So inviting them to the practice setting, we're typically out the month of August, and we will be again this year. That's a great time to get in touch with your member of Congress and invite them and show them exactly what we're talking about here.
Absolutely. Well, buddy, this is a great week to have you on the show. You talked a little bit about your 12 years in Congress, your Senate run that came up a little short. What's next? Where are you headed next? After, and you've got a lot of work to do between now and the end of the year. I understand that, but what happens next?
Well, you're right. We're going to sprint through the finish line. We'll finish this term, and then the first of the year, look, I've not made any secrets about the fact that I'm not finished politically. So, I'll still be involved. But we're talking to the administration about a possible appointment and looking at some other things. But I'll still be out there, not to worry. I'll still be advocating for pharmacy, and if there's something that we can do over at CMS, then certainly we're interested in that as well.
That's awesome. I mean, you're such a champion for us, obviously, being a pharmacist, particularly being a long-term care pharmacist. We sometimes, as Tom mentioned, feel a little invisible. We don't take care of a giant population, but we take care of a very important growing population. And to have you as a champion these past 12 years has been amazing for us as pharmacists. And we thank you for being a great American pharmacist for us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tom, any last words?
Yeah, no, I agree. Thank you. I know you're up there fighting and sweating it out, and you probably don't get a lot of days that make you smile. You remember the struggles of being a pharmacist. I'm sure you can call on a lot of those when you're on Capitol Hill, just kind of sweating to get through the day. But as a pharmacist, and I like to speak for all pharmacists across the nation. Thank you for fighting for us for the last 12 plus years, and I know you're going to keep the fight up. But you're doing what's important, and it doesn't go unnoticed for sure. So thank you for what you've done to this point, and what you're going to continue doing.
Well, thank you, and I can't tell you what an honor it is to represent such a great profession. And you alluded to it earlier about how we delivered during the pandemic, and I was so proud of our profession and how we stepped up, and with shots and vaccines and counseling. I was just so proud of our profession, and I remain proud of our profession. So I don't think I could have chosen a greater profession to practice than pharmacy. And by the way, I still have my license. I doubt I'll ever practice again, but I'm gonna keep that license. I work too hard for it.
It's a good backup plan.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think people forget too, pharmacies were some of the only places open during the pandemic when we were in shutdown.
Absolutely.
Doctors' offices weren't open. Yeah. It was pharmacies that were open. And not only did they do all the things with COVID vaccines and with making sure people kept getting their medications, which is critical, even in a pandemic, can't just stop getting your meds. They also served a purpose at getting people some goods and things that they needed, because not every place was open and available. So, what a time to be alive as a pharmacist to experience that.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
The stories across the nation of pharmacists coming and delivering not just their medications, but, delivering food and kind of helping, the people that couldn't get out there, most vulnerable. Yeah. And it's something to be proud of. And, when called upon, we certainly stepped up, and I know we will again.
Absolutely. Well, great. Definitely one of the brightest times for pharmacy in that 250-year history. So
that's right. I agree.
Well, thank you so much, buddy, for being on. We appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. Happy birthday, America. Enjoy the week and the rest of this year as we celebrate America. Our annual meeting is in October. It has a America 250 theme, and we're trying to build an age-friendly pharmacy for tomorrow is the theme. So we'll see everybody here, and it's in D.C., so we'll see everybody here in October. Thanks again, buddy. Appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
Have a good week.
Bye.
All right.
You too.